Today I'm joined again by Extra Dead JCB, a phenomenal poster, a friend, and someone who has a very, very interesting, very, very useful project to a lot of us on his hands now. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thanks.
I'm really happy to have you on again. I've watched curiously to see how you and I guess now a bigger team. This is definitely not a one man operation that you're running. Are building something, um, just essentially an exit route. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, basically, it's a fraternal organization for the goal is to help each other become robust to all these sort of backdoor forms of coercion that uh, we have the Constitution in the United States that guarantees us certain rights rhetorically on paper. But if you've got your livelihood and your kids' health insurance and everything else dependent on saying the right things and having the right opinions, then the what the government can or can't do to you is kind of irrelevant. And so the purpose of Exit is to help people become financially independent, become food independent, um, to learn how to use crypto and be able to be independent from the monetary system to whatever extent is feasible. And so yeah, I'm just interested in anything that helps people get away from their enemies, means of coercion. So yeah, we've got about 120 members now, and I want to say like 90 or so experts who have volunteered to mentor in whatever field, whether they're we've got one guy who runs a crypto VC, we've got one guy who does reputation management, we've got tons of software developers, guys who do farming, you know uh, so it's a group of guys that are really committed to uh, teaching each other and helping each other get out.
Okay, and this is it's limited to male members at the moment.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of we talked about a little bit of this last time I was on the show. I think that Exit is important for women too, but the offering, I wouldn't want to direct a woman into some job. And so the strategy for women in that environment is just so radically different that I think that someone should be providing that, but that's not what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. No, it wasn't a gotcha. It's just you're talking about a fraternity and I think, it does make sense, especially coming from I guess is it embedded in any sort of formal religious context, this fraternity, or is it just essentially just a fraternity without any boundaries to who can join?
No, I mean, well, not that there's no boundaries to who can join, but there's not religious boundaries. Um, it's essentially anyone who's on board with the mission and willing to contribute is welcome. I think it appeals to people whose religious views uh, are a target right now.
Yeah.
Um, but no, there's not like a creed.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think that definitely makes sense. I know so many people and so many, religious and para-religious, and even like people, like me who are ex-rationalists or ex-rational, kind of still tied into rationalism in some way or another, who are interested in this type of, yeah, exit. Coming back to the question, the big question, it seems that this organization is a testament to your faith in voice. Is your faith in voice none or small or slight, or what level are you at? Are you 2 out of 10?
Well, I mean, I think somebody said, these conservatives are trying to create a world where they don't have to have any dialogue with liberals. And my response to that was, no, I actually very much would like to get back to a place where we can have dialogue, but that means, they got to get the gun out of our face. Like we can't have a conversation where our livelihood is constantly under threat if we say the wrong thing. And so part of getting back to a healthy conversation as a country, as a people, if that can happen at all, it has to start with our people becoming robust to coercion so that they can speak freely. And so, I think if nothing changes and if people do not do things to secure their rights and carve out space for themselves, then yeah, voice is done. There's no participating inside that system. Um, but that doesn't mean, it's really easy to like catastrophize about the state of things because it's bad.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot can change in a relatively short amount of time. Um, I think I've been surprised personally to see how many otherwise normal people are waking up to our situation. And I mean, even a couple of these guys who were like the globe emoji types a
Mhm.
couple of years ago, um, are saying things that would have been that would have marked them as essentially frogs, back then. And so I'm not going to like prophesy that it's going to change, but I think the odds that it's going to change in a healthy way are pretty good.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting because I'm an adherent of elite theory, as many people are in our circles, and it does kind of trickle down, and I feel like there's quite a cohort of based people at the top now, in places that might not necessarily be transparent to everyone. This is shadowy Thielbucks type things, which I swear I'm not a part of, but I have heard that things are happening. People tell me, or that certain people are based, and based in the sense that they're concerned. They're not just based like, oh, I'm based, and then I'm just going to continue going on. They're really concerned, and they're talking to other people in their circles about it, and it does. I feel like it does trickle down, and
Yeah,
there is usually a point of no return when these preference cascades flip. And to me, obviously, being in these circles, I do tend to think that the moment is approaching, but also it could not be. I don't know. What's your feeling about this? What time is it?
I mean, yeah, it's it's sort of like timing a crash. Like you can say that it's coming, but that big short guy, um, had to turn off his uh, turn off his clients' access to their money while they waited for the market to crash on them. It's I mean, something is going to change. Something is going to change. A lot of people prognosticate based on like the current trajectory, and they say like, oh, this isn't sustainable, this is so awful, but also let's extrapolate it a century into the future and assume nothing changes. And my attitude, I mean, you get the same thing with like environmental catastrophism or
Mm.
like Malthusian catastrophism. Like what if current trends continue, into the foreseeable future? Like, wouldn't that be a disaster? It's like, well, they won't. They can't. And so
Never have.
um never have. So I definitely think, like I was talking about Mark Milley, the general that is talking about white rage now. Um, and people forget 2 years ago he was in his army costume marching with Trump during the riots, and like these people are not, they're not ideologues, they're survivors and they're cowards.
Hmm.
And so yeah, they'll go whichever direction they get pointed. And yeah, I mean, What I think we're waiting on is there are a couple. There's a little bit of like new blood in the GOP that I think has the potential to drive a real change. It's like this is how confident I am in voice. I'm talking about GOP politicians. Like there's hope there. I mean, but I hear the types of things that like Joe Kent is talking about and Blake Masters. Um, they're clearly following our guys. They're clearly reading our tweets. They're clearly responding to that energy, and it's just a question of how kind of how kind of gangster they're willing to be about it. I mean, are they willing to take it all the way? And
Yeah. Yeah,
Trump wasn't the guy.
yeah, sorry to interest you there, but yeah, I completely agree. I feel like there's power hanging there. There's power in the air, but I also feel
Yeah,
like it's kind of that old mold bug thing. Like the dog chasing the car, and when the car stops, I really hope that whoever is there knows what to do, because
yeah,
the exercise of power is not something a lot of leaders, even business leaders, are used to, and that at that level.
yeah. So I mean, it's going to have to be an exercise of power outside the previously defined rules of the system. And so, in order to have any kind of optimism about the future, you have to be imagining someone who A is willing to exercise that kind of like technically extrajudicial, extra legal uh, fiat just on the basis of like the will of the people, a Cincinnatus type. Um, so someone who's willing to exercise that kind of power, but who's also not going to do anything with that power that we would consider untoward. And that's, like people talk about like uh, DeSantis or some of these other politicians. And it's like, when I think of what they would have to do to get us out of this, it's like, well, I barely know that guy. Like, I'm not, I'm not real convinced about like, and the same is true with like with Joe Kent and all them. Like this sort of they're sort of new celebrities, and like, I guess what I'm saying is, people are noticing that the crown of France is on the ground, and someone is going to pick it up. Knock on wood, we hope. Um, but then there's another level of like, is that going to be a good guy, or our guy? Remains to be seen. But I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And, a lot of people are kind of scared of this idea, and scared of even discussing it. And that's why, a lot of times, people call me a fascist, and the people I invite on the show, they're fash. But my idea is that it was never not, the case that this was happening. So,
Yeah,
every time you had, even now, this is the status quo, but people don't see it. There is power, but it's unaccountable, it's distributed. Even the powerful are powerless by, it's just, the many-headed hydra, and
right.
it needs to be decapitated. And the best way has always been through some, great man of history. It just does not happen in any other form. So
Yeah.
it could be someone, obviously, with checks and balances, whichever way that's going to happen, kind of. But also, yeah, it will have to be that.
I mean, they're ultimately someone's going to have to undistribute that power, right? And that's a scary prospect. But like, the thing about Trump was that everybody, and I still feel it. Like, I am clear eyed about what happened on January 6th, and he did get people in trouble and hang them out to dry. And So like he clearly was not the guy, but the nostalgia that I have for that time was the the unity that so many people felt around him, the 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 faith and the hope that they placed in him uh, turned out to have been misplaced, but that those people are still here, and they are still, in spite of some disillusionment because of what happened, they're still waiting for somebody to show some courage, and
Do you think
and that's what gives me hope.
do you think if Trump was someone more like, the ideal, Blake Masters, if he's everything that everyone thinks he is, um, could he have done more, or at least, significantly more for his constituency? Or were his hands tied so much that, whatever the contents of the man, it would have been a similar outcome?
Well, you needed, I think the clownishness of Trump was necessary at the time. I think that there had to be, we're so irony poisoned as a people. I think that he had to be a little bit of a goof to give us permission to make all those God Emperor memes, and and to have our tongue in our cheek, and sort of dare people to take us seriously. Um, and I think the next phase is like, okay, let's get real. Like I still think on the whole he was good for the country in terms of the things that he exposed, and the things that because they had to go knives out for him. Like they had to tip their hand in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, and he forced that out of them, um, by being the sort of obnoxious troll that he is. Um, and so, like, to say, would it have been different with a different guy? I don't think a different guy would have worked in the beginning.
Mhm.
First of all, I still believe that, a lot of people, a lot of sort of true cons, um, made the argument during the 2016 election that, like, the mainstream media propped up Trump, um, in order to throw the election to Hillary, because who would vote for such a buffoon? Um, and I think that's true. I think they just miscalculated how much, what the depth of feeling on the right, that, like, um, I think that they did intend to throw the GOP primary to a ridiculous candidate. Um, but the energy is such that even a guy that ridiculous, just because he was at least rhetorically unambiguously on our side,
Mhm.
um, that lady talking about, or when he said, I could shoot somebody on Main Street and they'd still vote for me. That was true.
Yeah. That's true, and he's the only guy who stepped out of frame, and he held frame, as our manosphere friends would say. He held
Right.
his own frame, and he was also not in the leftist frame, because that the problem with a lot of conservative politicians is they're groveling even when they're trying to, exude confidence.
Right.
They're groveling for 10 years ago in terms of what the scraps from liberals. Is
Yeah.
you can't be confident from a position of such weakness, and everyone can smell it. And there's obviously not going to be, electoral, excitement about, I don't know, Mitt Romneys and McCain's and things like that.
Right. He's sort of the electoral equivalent of the, like, piss and cum groiper account on Twitter. Like those guys, everybody in our sphere who is uh semi-serious and respectable, all the guys who are filtering up into, um not mainstream, but positions of actual influence, that whole space exists because of the Groiper type. Um, And I'm a diversity of tactics guy. I think all of it needs to exist.
Mhm.
And so it's not like, whose approach is right. And that's sort of the answer to your question about Trump is you had to have both. And now it's time for something else.
Yeah.
And I don't take that to mean that like in 2024 it should be DeSantis and not Trump. Um, I don't know that we have a better candidate who's sort of ready for prime time in that slot than Trump. Um, but I think in terms of picking up the ball, it's gonna be other people. I mean, if for no other reason than he's just getting really old.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I recently read, like, I think it was the last essay that Curtis Yarvin wrote as a response to his COVID essay conspiracy. I don't know,
Yeah,
backlash. And he had an interesting line there. Sorry, I'm gonna look at my phone quickly just because I screenshot it. It was like it did make sense to me, even though I didn't jive with his COVID post because I'm not very into COVID to be honest. But
yeah.
uh, um, I like this one. I think it's true what he says here. If is this true in the specifically in the context of COVID? Maybe, but I think it's true in general. Um, it is safest to assume that when you are out of power, your goal is to build power, not use power. True, there are real opportunities for dissident collective action, but your monkey mind wants to see these opportunities so badly that not a hundredth of them are real, as just by basic, inescapable military logic. Um, and that's kind of my fear as well, because he is right in a way that there's kind of this accusation of quietism he gets a lot, but you could see this with January 6th. You could see this with even a lot of the CRT pushback. It's very hard to actually implement a lot of that stuff, and it does, create boogeymen. You just create boogeymen everywhere. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder what your feeling is about this statement of his, like that there are many mirages.
So yeah, I mean, in general terms, that's what exit is for. This group, the the philosophical underpinning of this was uh, we've got all these guys who want to do something, who want to move the ball. Um, why isn't anybody doing it? Well, they're not doing it because they don't have the capacity. They don't have their day job is sucking up like not only their energy, but it's also making them afraid to say what they think. And so the goal of exit is to build a critical mass of people who do not have those those chains on them. It's about building capacity, not exercising capacity. And that's it's funny to hear Moldbug say that because I've used almost exactly those words in a dozen phone calls about this.
Mhm.
Um, because people will call me and they'll be like, I don't know about this group because I don't really want to be in like a Fed posty right wing like space. And what I always tell them is like, that's exactly what we're not. Um, and it's not about quietism. It's not about hiding in the woods. It's about doing practical things. And we keep the conversation relatively practical in we're not talking about, we're not even talking about like organization or activism at this point. We're talking about raising chickens and learning Python and what's the expat situation like in the Balkans, or how do I learn to weld? How do I start a junk hauling business? Because that's the capacity. That's how you build freedom. Again, you can't just demand it. Like so many conservative or right wing conversations about this is like we need to. They seem to view the possibilities as like either we can vote or we can like go get shot by the cops. and and it's like there's a whole range of ways for you to build and exercise power that have nothing to do with any of that. And so yeah, that's that. I think Moldbug's absolutely right. at least in context of that quote. I mean, and ultimately, Moldbug's smugness about COVID and a bunch of other things is rooted in the fact that his actual deep principles, like his lifestyle, the way he would like the world to be, is not really wedded to any like religious principle that he can't compromise on. Like, you know, with us, it's you know, we have these commitments that we can't compromise on. And for him, it's very much like Machiavellian, like what would I do to build and maintain power? And it's like, well, yes, if that's all you believe in, then it does make sense to like keep your head down, infiltrate the system, say whatever lies you need to tell. Like, I get where he's coming from there. That's just not our situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense from his perspective. I think he's, you know, he's essentially an aristocrat. He's always been one. I don't think he's ever denied it. And
Sure.
he lives the, you know, the life and the life of the mind of the aristocrat, you know.
He's obviously proud of it. He's not at all ashamed of it.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And I think, you know, a lot of his efforts in a way are to describe, you know, what is going wrong in politics in general, to analyze the nature of power, but also to muse on the idea of a regime that would be just for people that are unlike him, which is quite, you know, it's quite nice in terms of his station in his position, because
Sure.
a lot of people would not really care. But yeah, that's, you know, I just wanted to say, you know, Yarvin's also, you know, kind of an interesting thinker in that sense.
Oh yeah, I am a Moldbug respecter, even you know, even with all the COVID stuff. Like I disagree with this. That's another thing. Like we're so even on our side, it's like people can't just be wrong.
Yeah.
Like they have to be feds, or they have to be disingenuous, or like, I don't know, like, you know, my attitude is, and they do this with Joe Rogan, they do this with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, exactly. With Baps as well.
With yeah, anytime BAP steps out of line in their view, it's like, my attitude is, if somebody's ever made me think an interesting thought, if somebody's ever opened something up for me, like, that is so rare that like I want to keep that guy around and see if that ever happens again. He can be wrong every other time, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely,
we're so short on, especially in our time, there's such a dearth of creative energy and vitality and insight that like anybody who can produce that is precious. And so, yeah, like, Moldbug is always going to be important to me, just because of like any of a dozen things that he's said. He can be wrong, and that's fine. You know what I mean?
And like you said, Jordan Peterson is such a, he's been a gateway for a lot of smart people to come into these circles. And some people are just going to be, the marijuana of intellectual curiosity, or what the cop stirrup, you know, and it's fine. Some people need that. Sorry to turn this into a dark direction, but you know, this is there are levels, people. So it's absolutely fine. And you know, I think it's also cloud chasing. You know, it's people are just want to piggyback, because I see these like, I don't know, 5 follower accounts just tearing into I don't know BAP or whoever.
Like, what have you accomplished? Like what's your contribution?
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's interesting. Beef is interesting. I try to stay away from it, but sometimes people just drag me into it. And I get it. Well, it's something you want to follow. Like that's, you know, that's what I do at night. You know, when the baby wakes me up, I just scroll Twitter, and it does seem that, you know, beef is the thing I tend to look up, but then other things to see. Oh, what are these people? So yeah.
Well, and there's also this part of BAP's character that a lot of our sort of sphere has emulated, is this haughtiness and disdain. And because of that character, like if they get criticized, they kind of are in a situation where they sort of have to clown on you a little bit. And so like I get in the sense that you know, people get emotional about that, but it's ultimately, like, that's just going to be part of the game. Is like you have to understand that, like, well, first of all, people often will like ask me to like explain my takes, and it's like, I don't know you. I'm not gonna like go back and forth with you on, like, you know, this thing that you just don't get and probably aren't going to get. And like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm being arrogant, but I definitely understand where that comes from.
Yeah, I also think, you know, it's the friend enemy distinction, which people very much adhere to.
Sure.
And I feel like it might be a little bit of you know, like a hair trigger instinct in these in these waters, because like you said, you know, you can have 1,000 base takes, post cringe once, and someone will come after you and, you know, label you a fed, or you're part of the, you know, the out group instantly. And then it's very hard for you to come back. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like you have a group where people, I guess, exchange personal information at one point. I guess there's probably some layers of anonymity, but at one point you do meet up in person. You do talk to. Have you?
Well, honestly, most of these guys are not really that concerned about doxing.
Okay.
Like, a lot of these guys are fairly regular guys, and what they're trying to do is not comply with the vax mandate, or they just sort of believe in. I mean, I told a guy a couple of weeks ago, like, if someone asked me why I am so committed to getting people out of the corporate environment, I could politics wouldn't even enter into that conversation for like 2 hours. I could go on and on about why that environment just sucks and is miserable on its own non-ideological merits. And so a lot of these guys just don't like the companies they work for, and the things that they're required to support, or at least stay quiet about. And so in most cases, I think partly the vax mandate woke a lot of people up to like, I'm not going to be able to keep my head down. Like, I'm going to be made to comply. This is going to, you know, it's not a question of rhetoric. But I think also a lot of those same guys are like, I'm just tired of having to shut my mouth during diversity training. And like, there's no threat to them right now. There's no threat to them right now because so far they have kept their mouth shut during diversity training, and they don't tweet about it. But they're tired of having to, and they want to get out. I would say at this point, maybe a quarter or a third are anon. But I mean, there's also a substantial cohort of the guys that have already exited, and they're here to support, and they're here to mentor and teach. And so, yeah, it's kind of, you know, choose your own adventure. And like, I definitely preserve the anonymity of the guys who want to be anon. But yeah, it's definitely a trusted environment, in the sense that everybody who comes in has to go through an intake call with me. And, you know, I'm not doing background checks, but the kind of people who are hostile to us are not particularly good at simulating our opinions and expressing them in a convincing way. And I've told the guys, you know, from the beginning, like, the odds that somebody someday is going to sneak in here and read your things that you say, you know, among us, it's inevitable. And so you should be careful what you say. But again, the point of this group is not to talk about that stuff. Like, my goal is for somebody to get into that group and, you know, pay me the fee to get into this group and then, learn a bunch about chickens and crypto and 3D printing and be totally bored and then leave. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely anonymity there, but it's not the kind of environment and the kind of conversations where that should even really be necessary.
Okay. So you haven't gotten any, accusation that this is a doxing ring or some some crazy thing, because this type of stuff, goes around a lot in
Not that I've heard. I mean, and ultimately, like, I don't I have to verify, that someone is who they say they are, but um it's pretty easy to tell.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know. I guess that could come back and bite me, but it's pretty easy to tell. Like, the types of guys that we're getting are very clearly committed. They're very, like, the level of, like, above and beyond that these guys put in to help each other is, like, I don't know, like, if you're a Fed, like, I guess you're like a really nice Fed. I don't know.
Yeah, you're converting Feds left and right.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's the dream, right?
No, but no, this sounds extraordinary. And do you guys also have in-person meetups at this point, or is it just all online?
So we had one in Utah back in October. I'm planning to do them roughly quarterly. And it was just Utah because at the time that was kind of the critical mass. We had probably 15 guys who were able to come to that, and just a good opportunity to get FaceTime with each other. Um, and again, my goal with this is to if people found out that you were part of this group, it would be like, well, I'm also part of this other entrepreneurship, you know, group where we talk about our side hustles and things. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of fun. We just got burgers and went to one of our guys. One of our guys runs he owns a wind turbine design, and we went to his wind turbine factory and,
Nice.
like, learned a little bit about that and how that business works, and kind of a Mr. Rogers type, like, you know,
Yeah.
uh,
That's
watching the process. And
That's awesome.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I can hide my excitement, but my husband, he's also in like a few of these like mastermind groups with his
Oh
business.
yeah.
And he just loves it. It's like his favorite thing to go to these things. And I'm sure there's boozing and whatever, but it's also like he comes back so energized, and he's always kind of scales up his business. The few weeks afterwards. So like the inspiration and energy that men, I guess, I don't know. I haven't ever been to any of these, and also I don't really have a great man for business, but that he gets from this is astounding. So I don't know. It's definitely something that,
Yeah.
yeah, there needs to be more of this.
I mean, just having people who care about what you're doing is a huge help, I think. And our most recent, like, big win was we had a guy who came into the hot seat because so we have hot seat calls where somebody has a difficulty and we all bring the brain trust together to try to solve it. And the initial idea was that this would be people who were being doxxed or who were about to be fired because of a vax mandate. We've had several of those, but um, this guy was just like, I'm running a business and my revenue isn't growing the way that it should be, and I'm actually considering kind of crawling back to a W-2 job. And we were all like, well, we don't want that. So we got in a room together, and, like, a lot of people just listened because they didn't have, like, a brainwave on this topic. But we had 3 or 4 sales guys, professional sales guys, who were like, why don't you try this, 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 and this? And he took that, and, he just reported back that he's on track to double his revenue in a year, and he's breaking records every month. And, like, it really took off for him. And, like, there's a component where I want to see people free. I want to see people um, able to set their own terms and be the master of their own destiny. And I guess that is kind of ideological for now, for today. But, like, what gets me up out of bed in the morning is, like, I want our guys to just be happy and successful and capable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 and that's just such a good sentiment. I mean, I love it. Was this the beginning of this project prompted by your unfortunate doxing?
Yeah. So back in August, well, I guess in July, I was informed ahead of time that I was going to be doxxed. I think they were trying to sort of, I guess, just sort of savor the moment and like make me scared for a little while longer. But it actually gave me some time to think, and I didn't have like a great plan, but I knew that I had enough of a network on Twitter, and I was a data scientist, which is relatively in demand. I knew that I could work that network and find something. Mm-hmm. But I thought, well, if I have this network, why would I just exploit kind of one path through that network and take one thing for me? Why wouldn't I use that whole network? Because, one of the things that I found once the news came out was dozens of people reached out to me and they were like, this sucks. I'm so sorry. I wish there was something we could do. And I remembered being in that situation when some of my friends got doxxed, because this was a ring that was operating for several months. And I was like dead in the middle of the people who were targeted. And I remember being like, well, my friend who's a lawyer lost a job. I don't know any law jobs. So that sucks. I wish I could do something, but I kind of have no idea what to do. And I thought, what if somebody took all of this goodwill and all of this desire to help and sharpened it into something that you could, set somebody up? And I essentially woke up the morning that I was fired, and I knew it was coming, but I was so full of energy. I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know it's going to work, and I actually felt relieved. I felt, there were moments of anxiety, not really about like, how am I going to feed my family? Because again, like I knew that I had lots of ways to do that. And I also had a substantial like financial runway, for kind of serendipitous reasons. I think God was in it. I think that I'd never been sitting on that kind of money before in my life, and I just happened to be. And it gave me plenty of time to have the confidence to say like, well, I can give this 10 months, and if I can't figure it out, I'll go find another job, but that's plenty of time. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I actually, and that really helped with like the resentment, because a lot of people were like really, really angry on my behalf about this. Like, we got to get these people. And I was sort of like, I felt that we had all sort of participated in a process. We were all complicit. Like there were a million crossroads on my sort of Twitter career where, I could have exposed less of my information, or I could have not said this or that thing, and kept my job. And I realized that if I had actually valued the job, I would not have done that. I would have taken the safer course. But increasingly, the stuff that I was doing on Twitter and the connections I was building there were like the only real thing I was doing in the world outside of my family, because my job was a joke. And even if it hadn't been a joke, even if I was actually contributing to that system, that would have been worse. Like I was glad to be doing nothing for those people. So anyway, I realized that essentially these people had helped me to burn my ships and get me out. And so like I was still afraid of them, because like they gave out my address, they gave out like pictures of my family, and like it was, that piece of it was scary, because I was like, how far are these people going to take it? Like what's the next step? But from a like, you stole this wonderful job from out from under me, I was kind of like, nah, whatever, let it go. So it ended up being a really good experience. And I got there was a definitely like a cadre of guys on day one who were like, I love this plan. Let's get on it. Let's jump. And so like in the first day, I think I had like 40 signups,
Nice.
which, yeah, I mean, that was enough to extend my runway substantially. And now it's at the point where it's paying my basic bills, and it's, I can continue to work on it indefinitely and improve the offering. So it's
nice.
I didn't expect it to go as fast as it did.
This is your main job now, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. This is what I do. And it's like a 60-hour a week commitment right now. Because it's lots of intake calls, lots of marketing, lots of recording and editing podcasts.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's a lot, but on the other hand, it feels so much easier than doing a 9-to-5 in a situation that I hated.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of these things are blessings in disguise, especially because I feel like a lot of people have kind of been lulled into a very comfortable situation, and they feel like any shakeup of that situation is equivalent to death, but it really isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of taken the jump. Being a face poster, I was like, obviously I'm not, saying that I'm, as spicy as the spiciest gropers out there. Definitely not. And I do sometimes hold back being like, maybe
Sure.
today's not the day I'm gonna, jump kamikaze style into the volcano. But I feel like I'm pretty loose, and I don't know. To be honest, like the people that I'm involved with in business, they know what I do. They have not been necessarily, against it. It's not come down on me in a terrible way. I love doing the podcast. Some people, dislike the podcast. That's fine. It's just what's going to happen if you're out there. But it's.
Do you think that that's a function of living in Eastern Europe, where it's a little bit like the mores are different?
I mean, the people that I work with are in the UK and
Okay.
Australia, Canada, different regions. So, not really. I think the UK is pretty woke. At least that's my impression of it, and that's essentially kind of what slowly red pilled me to this point. Yeah, because I was working kind of in a tech finance context there, and it was just. I mean, you can imagine. You can imagine what it was, and it was like biting your tongue every day, and that I really didn't like that. So yeah, I mean that's where I am now, and it's been almost all upside. I mean, for now, some would say that it's because I'm a Fed, but that's guys.
I mean, in my case, it actually restored a lot of my faith in average people, because the consequences that I was maybe the most concerned about were losing friends.
Yeah.
And so far, I mean, anytime that I'm introducing myself, or like when it first happened, anytime I was introducing myself, or like seeing people for the first time, it would be like, oh, what do you do for a living? Or how's work? How's the new job coming? And I had to be like, well, I got fired. And why did you get fired? Like, because you can either be like, well, I was fired because I was incompetent and lie, or you can say, I was fired for saying spicy things on the internet.
Being a right-wing celebrity.
Well, but I mean, I would always be like, look, I was just some analyst for some faceless corporation. Like, the fact that I made it onto the Guardian, people kind of had to be like, that's silly. Like, why is that news? Why is that relevant to anybody? And so, like, we've got neighbors who are other races, other faiths, different views, and lots of my friends. And so far, I've had one person reach out to me and be like, we're not involved with you anymore. And like, but they were somebody who there was already a lot of tension about all that stuff. And so it was kind of not surprising, and I was not real broken up about it. And then one other friend of mine who I do care quite a bit about, who has not called me in a while, and that, that one hurt. But overwhelmingly, it's been, I'm realizing that people no longer trust the media in the way that they did even 10 years ago. And so the fact that the Guardian called me a racist and a fascist, it just doesn't hold a lot of water with normal people. Obviously it's kind of a, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes type of situation. Like, if I'm hanging out with you and you're not white and we are good friends and we're bringing you soup when you had a baby, and like, you know what I mean? Like, there's an element of like, come on, but yeah, I mean, part of being forced out into the open is learning what people would actually think of you if you were honest with them. And so far that's been pretty good.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I feel like that's mirrored my experience as well. I feel like had a few friends that I had to be kind of disingenuous with when I was, with them, and they also kind of, yeah, they slowly slipped away from my life silently. We didn't have a big confrontation, but it's kind of clear what happened. It's just just saying, I know that they know about my podcast and they know that they know about my Twitter feed,
right.
and they have not called in about half a year, so I can kind of guess what happened there. But yeah, no, like hardcore confrontations with anyone, which I think is is good. At least maybe people are scared to confront me. That's a good reputation. So yeah, it is sad to lose friendships, but like you said, there's some people, the people who hang around are all the more precious because yeah, you know that they're resilient to whatever's coming. So it's a good.
Yeah, and I actually had one dear friend, who, an older guy, who is sort of, we lived in his house for a while and we were very like integrated with his family, and someone that I love a lot. And he called me like a week later and was like, why wouldn't you talk to me if you're in this situation? Like, you need to reach out to people who care about you, and like, what are you doing? And that was very, very encouraging. So yeah, a lot of good things, a handful of bad things. On the whole, I'm glad it happened. And I spoke to one of my friends who I kind of consider a mentor in this area, because he got doxxed like 10 years ago, and is self-employed now. And he told me, like, everybody I know that's been doxxed is glad that it happened, because what you rebuild is so much better. Because again, like, the opportunities that are foreclosed to you by being honest about that, the opportunities to hang out with the kind of people who would be really irritated with you, and the opportunities to work for people who despise those values, like, it's not that bad of a thing to not have those opportunities.
Yeah, and also on the flip side, like I've never gotten more and more interesting job offers than since I've been on Twitter. Yeah, it's stuff that would never kind of come my way. I mean, I'm not interested in getting a new job. Thank you very much, but it's quite interesting how much of a premium people would pay for honesty, because that's essentially what I'm saying stuff off the cuff. That's maybe wouldn't even be so innovative like 20 years ago, but now I'm just blurting out things from the 1980s on my timeline. People are like, "Whoa, look at this beast!" So I'm just being super cool with that, and a lot of people appreciate that. Even in business, you kind of need a little bit of that. So
yeah,
it does come. I'm not saying that everyone could benefit from this. I also don't want to encourage people to just like jump out there and start, whatever, posting very spicy stuff, expecting the job offers. Not necessarily a direct line from that to that, but if you can, exhibit a certain skill, a certain spectrum of skills, that's rare, even if it's tied into a bit of a controversial thing. I think it could pay off. But yeah, it's
I mean, you're absolutely right that, like, and I wouldn't want to give people that idea either, that I'm telling them to go, face fag, like just sort of without preparation. Obviously this whole group is built around like, don't do that. Like get your situation squared away first so that you can safely say what you need to say. Because, I was talking to somebody just yesterday about that type of mentality, like, oh, if we all just sort of storm the Bastille now and we all just come out and say what we need to say, then we'll all be like, the spell will be broken and they won't be able to persecute all of us. And it's like, nobody's going to follow you. Like that's going to be a really tricky coordination problem. And so we need to solve that problem in a really, grown up way, by building capacity and by putting people in situations where they can safely do that. And like, yeah, there's definitely pioneers in the space who take the risk, and God bless them. Like that definitely opens the aperture for the rest of us. But I wouldn't advocate that as a general strategy. I think especially like regular guys, and there's tons of regular guys, and it's okay to be a regular guy. Like most of those people should get their ducks in order, and then, post.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. So, if I were to be a dissident person, maybe anonymous, and I come to you, Exit, is there kind of some basics, some areas that you would focus on to guide me, or is it just kind of an on demand thing? Like I've got problems with this, tell me what to do, or is there kind of a structured program?
I mean, essentially what I would ask them is, where are you right now and where would you like to be? And that in part is professional, but a lot of them are like, well, I'd like to try to live overseas, or I'd like to buy some land, or I just don't want to work for these people anymore and I don't really care what I do, or like I've always wanted to like learn how to weld. Like it's very much self-directed, but like in terms of the structure of it, we have weekly calls as a full group. We have 5 smaller groups that meet to talk about various topics. So like there's a tech one, an entrepreneurship one, a homesteading and trades one, a content creator one. So like you can get into groups with other people who just want to talk about that thing, or who have expertise there. And we get people together. So a lot of the purpose of these calls that I do with them one-on-one is to suss out, how can you help other people? How can other people help you? And it's a lot of those kinds of making connections. And I think part of the value there is like, yes, there are some people who don't want to broadcast their skill set for like doxing reasons, but they do want to make their skill set available to people who they can help. And so like I become sort of the trusted node in that system, and I connect people. But I think there's also, I think even more than that, it's just that guys are sort of uncomfortable making those connections cold. And I am not uncomfortable making those connections cold. And so I will, bring people together, and, or they just aren't aware of what the needs are. And someone's got to keep track of everybody. And, so we make a lot of those connections. We've definitely had guys who have started businesses either for themselves or they've partnered together to start businesses. There's lots of like tech type projects going on, but there's also guys who are starting a carpet cleaning business, learning how to run a landscaping business. It kind of runs the gamut, but it really is. If you're in particular, if you're a dissident on Twitter and you're like posting and you're afraid of getting fired, my goal would be to get you into whatever kind of entrepreneurship or contract employment makes you the most robust to that you're not going to hate. And so, everybody's situation is so different. Like, some people are willing to, like, I had one guy who was in enough of a crisis situation and in enough of a high visibility environment that, like, our goal was not to get him to the dream job. Our goal was to just hide him out, get him in a place where he's making money, but he's not under the eye of Sauron. And it was very, like, immediate and practical. We just need to get you another job. But I think for most of these guys who are working a long-term, like, dream vision, it's, who do you want to be when you grow up? And we just work toward that.
Nice. Very, very Jordan Peterson-y, if I may add. I think it's the between where you are and where you want to go. That's a very important theme in the Petersonian universe. And just to say that, don't write off Peterson yet, because he's still important. I don't want to ask you the question of the show, because you've already answered the question of the show, and I don't want to be mining you for thinkers every time. So I think I'm just gonna continue with this maybe for another 10 minutes, and then we can wrap. But I want to ask you about remote work. How much of a part does remote work play into exit? Is it something that you recommend people do, or is it more of a get off the grid, get back to trades and more less digitally mediated forms of employment?
No, it's 100%. It's 100% choose your own adventure. It's because not everybody is going to be a farmer, and not everybody should be. And the directions, the broad directions that I've identified that seem to make sense are, yes, trade jobs, yes, like homesteading, yes, entrepreneurship, but, like, there are definitely people who just sort of by temperament are not interested in those paths. And, like, I think if you're capable of learning to code, and you want this kind of freedom, but you don't want to, like, take on the whole project of running a business, then yeah, remote work is exactly where you need to be, because that opens up your job market to the whole planet, and it opens up where you can live to the whole planet. And I really think that we're seeing an exodus. There's an internal frontier in the States where all of these beautiful places on the inside of the country that used to be not uninhabitable, but not practical for middle class people to live in and have a career, are opening up. And so we've got tons of guys who are moving to Missouri and Arkansas and Tennessee, and just sort of filling in the middle of the country. And my hope is that we don't poison those places. But I think my dream for myself and my family is to be somewhere that is so, where, like, the hillbilly reputation is so deep that, like, coastal people would never want to live there. So I think West Virginia is good from that perspective. Oklahoma, Arkansas, these are unbelievably beautiful places with really, really cool people. And they have that stink on them, and that's good. And I want it to stay that way.
Would you consider?
And I think people picture, like, what's that?
Would you consider moving anywhere outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have several people in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and that seems to be a pretty good arrangement for folks that can handle the culture shock. I don't know enough about the political situation over there to, like, authoritatively tell people, like, yes, it's so based over there and it's going to stay based. And, like, that's, I'm not going to.
No, and it's so different country to country, and things are shifting so rapidly that it's very hard to predict. It's, I think the people are just essentially more based because, hard to say. They're more backward in good ways and bad ways. They're just not so exposed to all of the stuff that we're exposed to. So they're naturally based, but that's always a tenuous equilibrium, and forces beyond our control are coming from the globalist American empire every day. So yeah, it's very hard to say what's going to happen. And Eastern Europe is already a super volatile place in terms of politics, so could go anywhere. Yeah, but we usually take our directions from the European Union here. So whatever happens in the EU is coming here soon enough.
Yeah, I think it's more of a question of how do you want to live versus like what political environment do you want to be in, if that makes sense. Like there's so many variables outside of like policy questions that people have to consider. Like we've got guys who are looking at Serbia, who are looking at Poland, Hungary, Belize, and like ultimately, I think before you look at like who's the president over there or whatever, you should be looking at like what's the weather like. You know what I mean? Like, do you, and like what are the people like? Do you want to live there? Like people kind of, I think at first blush they view this from like kind of a LARPy perspective. Mm-hmm. And like I think that's just the wrong approach. Like treat it like any other move, be an adult about it. And so like there's definitely guys who for them that's the dream, and I trust them to do their homework and figure out that that's the dream, and I'm just there to make it happen, to connect them with whatever resources I can connect them with. So I wouldn't encourage or discourage any particular landing place.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's, I think for some people it can work to come here, but like you said, it is pretty much a culture shock. There's also no tradwife farm. Just want to confirm this. There's no farm where tradwives are grown. Just for some people, keep asking me. No, we do not grow.
Well, I mean, one of my guys lives in Central Europe and was talking about how plots of land are measured in hectares. And they're very small. Like the continent has been under such intensive cultivation for so long, and expectations of like scale are so different there that like if you want the big sprawling homestead, it kind of has to be here, or at least not in Europe. And that's just maybe an expectation that people don't have.
Yeah, I think there are little things like that can be a big shock. Yeah, I think also especially farming it's probably not very monetarily feasible in many places. I know like in the UK it's very hard to farm, but here it's the return on investment is very low. So that you have these mega farms that, and also you have food imports from the rest of Europe, which is highly subsidized by the EU. So farmers here can barely survive, and they're like literally doing subsistence farming because you can't compete with the big farms. So yeah.
Right. The way that homesteading works here, to the extent that it works, is you're selling to rich people who want the raw organic. Like you can move a gallon of raw milk for $10 here. And a dozen raw eggs for $6 or $7, and those are not market prices. Those are like fancy pants farmers market prices. And so like if the bottom falls out of the economy, you're not going to be living the way that you're living on your like quote unquote farm. It's going to be very, very different. And so, yeah, there's a realization of like, what does independence mean? What does sovereignty mean? What are you really buying? There's a lot of angles to it. It's a lot deeper it's a harder decision than I think some people anticipate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, we have 14 chickens and a cow, and we're looking at getting pigs. And like, if you find that way of life beautiful, and you can, and you can afford it, like, God bless you, let's do it. I'm all about it. But like, it's not, there's a reason people who can code.
Yeah, exactly. I've talked to a few friends of mine who are homesteading, and they can do it if they also code. So it's
exactly.
It's kind of for those.
And I mean, I definitely have. We have a handful of friends who are full time, essentially farmers and homesteaders. But again, they're not really competing with Walmart for eggs.
Yeah.
And so like, you have to view it like, so the shrimp farming thing, we had this meme in the group about shrimp farming. We're all going to make $325,000 growing shrimp in the bathtub. And I actually do think that it was a 4chan meme.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys were sort of joking about it in the group, and I said, well, I'll go figure that out. So I went and found one of the biggest domestic shrimp farmers in the country, and I learned that it's about $100K to start up. It's profitable in like 3 years. But it actually, like, if you have that kind of capital and that kind of time to make something work, it actually is a pretty good passive income stream once you get it running. And we have one guy in the group who's actually kind of in the investment exploratory type phase with that project. So like, people are really doing it. It's just, it's complicated and there are trade-offs. And it's but it is really cool to watch. Like, we don't let our memes be dreams here at Exit. We make them happen. So it's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, it's a really exciting project, and I'm happy you came on to explain it to people. At the moment, I think is it limited to people from the US?
No, we got some Aussies. We got a guy in China. We got people all throughout Central Europe. It's everywhere. It's harder for the Europeans to make the evening calls, but we actually, as a matter of fact, as soon as I get off the call, I'm going to jump onto our Europe call, which is at a more reasonable time for them. So I would say there's probably 15 or 20 who are outside the US.
Oh, nice. Excellent. So, well, I want to direct all of my male listeners who are interested in this project to go check it out and sign up and also listen to the Exit podcast. You guys have a podcast now.
That's right. Exitgroup.podbean.com is the podcast, and exitgroup.us is the website.
Excellent. And at ExtraDeadJCB on Twitter is an excellent, wonderful, marvelous poster that everyone should.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on.